up, guys? I'm Joshua Henslee, and we are doing the CoinGeek Roundtable. And this time we're coming live. So this time, that means you can participate in the chat. Be sure to leave some comments, and we'll try to address them towards the end of the stream. Today, we'll be discussing open social protocols on Bitcoin. I'll be joined by three guests. First will be Rohenaz, the CEO of TonicPow. Second will be Zach Weiner, the founder of VX Technologies. And third will be Siggi, the creator of Blockpost.network. Be sure to subscribe to the CoinGeek YouTube channel, as well as hit the notifications so that you'll be alerted for the next roundtable. And also, I'll reiterate, please participate in the chat, and we'll try to address any comments or questions at the end of the stream. But first, take a look at this.
This is London, coming at you. Everybody, this is London. This is London.
All right, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So first, we'll start with brief introductions before we get into the discussion. So we'll start with you, Luke.
Yeah, I'm Rohenaz. Been in Bitcoin for kind of a long time. TonicPow is the company that I started with a couple other co-founders back in I think 2019. Started all at the first Bitcoin Association hackathon, and since then I've just been building lots of different stuff. And this open social protocol stuff has been particularly of interest to me.
Yeah. You next, Zach.
Hi, I'm Zachary Weiner, founder of VX Tech. Been a software engineer in blockchain for going on 6 years now. But I've been in BSV since 2020-ish. Mm-hmm. I came here from Ethereum through a long path through trying other chains, but now I've been pretty much just focused on consumer applications built on top of Bitcoin.
Right. And Siggi?
Yeah, Siggi. I've been in Bitcoin, I think that's a big word, for a very long time. And in software development for even longer. And for the last three and a half years, trying to focus most of my development on Bitcoin stuff. So I've done, I think the first thing that I did was that might be a little bit known as Legally Chained with Ari Cookie. And been building ever since. Did Ona with George, which is unfortunately closing now. Worked with Luke at TonicPow. We built a Box server. Built a Jungle Bus for Grillerpool, and just trying to be a positive influence on the ecosystem.
Yeah. So the first question I'd like to ask you guys is, what are open social protocols? And I think, Luke, you're probably the best person to kick that off.
Yeah, so there's one thing I want to say with this question. So first, open social protocols are basically a set of rules that we use to structure data to put it on chain so that any app can consume and write that data the same exact way. And now you have interoperability across multiple clients. So you could have a whole bunch of different websites that look and feel slightly different, but the underlying database is Bitcoin. Now, the reason I want to say there's an extra little thing here is that we're talking about open social protocols, but I just want to point out that this is not limited to social. That is one use case, and using Bitcoin as a common backend for interoperability is just a huge Bitcoin feature that's very underused currently and applies to almost every industry. Well, some more than others, but anytime that society needs like records or some data set that we all rely on where we don't want somebody to have control or something like this, that's where this sort of thing fits in really well.
Yeah. Zach, what's your opinion on the definition?
I also think that, while this conversation may be limited or guided by social protocols, I think that's probably because the first one that's getting traction is open social. Right. To me, I think the conversation, it shouldn't just be limited to social because, and I'll make some esoteric correlations later, but to me, the openness is what drives adoption. I think almost at every example that you can come up with, exposing some layer of either interoperability or at least the interface so that other people can make things that become interoperable was part of the success of any company that was driving either a dev product, something that people were going to develop on, or a product that other companies could build on top of. And when we look back at the last 30 or 40 years of growth, like that's almost the entirety of the engine is building on, previous gains. And to me, that's one of the things that's most powerful about the protocol that we're here to talk about is in the piping, you can just build on the data that's already there, right? You can, essentially add your own protocols that nobody else knows about and use closed protocols on top of the open ones that have made this data either available to you or at least accessible to you.
Right. And Siggi?
Well, I'd like to add something new to that because I agree with everything they just said. But I've been experimenting with something else, is to use a Bitcoin in the context of these social protocols, actually as a communication bus almost, or something like that, or distribution network. That's a better word for it, a distribution network. So I have Blockpost.network as like a proof of concept to do that. But I fired up Blockpost networks in other places, like other places on the planet, and they basically just, they boot up from the Bitcoin network, and you don't have to have these things synced to each other. So you get something new actually, because you get these distribution network that's actually secured, because all the data is hashed, it's signed, it's awesome. So there's like this other layer on top of open social, especially defined protocols that we can reuse. But also this distribution network. We could be in Asia and do the same thing and have nothing to do with each other. We get all the same data. I think that's very exciting.
Right. And I think the element there is choice too, of, what do you show, what do you not show, that sort of stuff. Okay. The next question I want to ask is, what is the Bitcoin schema? Because that's a website out there, but that is a start of the implementation of an actual social media protocol. So we'll work our way towards the more concrete. So Luke, again, we'll start with you.
Bitcoin schema is designed to be like a wide net. So what we realize is, okay, we need definitions for the way that we put data on chain. We're starting with this social stuff. And so we defined social actions on the Bitcoin schema website, such as a like, a post, how to add an attachment, all of these different individual components that make up what we recognize as a social media network. But again, we've always known that this is not limited to social media. So we needed a construct that lived above that layer, that we could add more protocols and more use cases. There's been some people lately, getting interested in that and hitting me up and asking about, what about this use case? And yeah, there's just, it's like at any time that there's a need to coordinate, like social media is just a great example. It's a great starting point, and there's a lot of problems in that sphere. And so there's a great way for people to understand, what this power and this ability really is. But again, yeah, it can be applied to anything. And that's the point of Bitcoin schema, is to have a place where we can put all of these, standard ways to kind of write things. And it's important to note, Bitcoin schema itself is not a specific protocol. It is basically a collection of protocols and definitions, because some other use cases or whatever might not use the same exact pieces. But these protocols that we're talking about, they're like composable. They're different pieces. So we have like MAP is Magic Attribute Protocol, which is like just putting arbitrary, metadata onto the transaction. Then you have AIP for adding signatures, for signing that data with a key not related to the key used to send the payment. And then you have BAP, which is the attestation protocol, which adds actual real identity and allows people to do attestations and associate that signed data with a hard identity that's like something that you have control, where you can rotate your keys and all the features that we'd expect from an identity system.
Yeah. And Zach, I know you're a relative newcomer because some of this stuff was built before you joined the space. So from your perspective, what would you define the Bitcoin schema as?
Well, I don't know that this is true, but I may be one of the first people building an enterprise-grade application on Magic Attribute Protocol. I guess that is true, at least one of the first, right? But sorry, was the question the value?
Well, how do you view it as someone because with Luke and Siggi and myself, we've kind of seen that be created and evolve from the beginning. But for yourself, you mentioned that you've had to kind of go through other chains, and then, that was already built by the time you arrived.
So I actually, in all honesty, I had to go through other protocols first as well, right? And there are trade-offs in everything, right? So there's trade-offs if you're going to go with Scrypt or you're going to go with Run, or you're going to go to Magic Attribute Protocol, or you're going to use some combination thereof. But for me, I view it as essentially the foundations of a toolkit. So almost like a toolbox, right? And now everybody sort of has this toolbox that they can build out the way that they need, that they're comfortable with in their tool set for the jobs that they're going to go do, right? A carpenter's toolbox is probably going to be different than a general construction worker who's probably going to have a different toolbox than the site manager, right? They're all just going to have different tools on them for the jobs that present themselves. And, I think we get pushed into this conversation about protocols and it being social, and the first choice being social for the schema. But I think that happens because social media, the way that we interact with it today, is really one of the first places where humans on their own accord continually go and add their own information, right? They feel like there's a reason for them to come back to this thing and put more information onto it. There aren't a lot of other applications where the human compulsion to go and use it continues that way. And, social media applications have gamified it in order to hook you harder. But it's still true that there are very few other applications out there that compel individual users to come back as often and use it and create unique information to share with that application. So, I view it as an incredibly powerful thing. I think we get pigeonholed in social because it's relatable to the mass amount of people. We all, use Twitter or Twetch or whatever of the other names that we won't mention on here. But the idea of being able to have this toolkit, this toolbox for you to put your own tools into, but it comes as a framework that says, hey, if you just do these pretty standard things, anybody else can can use the tools in your kit. And if your tools are incredibly customized, you can actually take a look at them before you pick them up and try to use it, right? So you can inspect them and see if they're valuable to you. And I think the way that this was done, I'll come back to the point that Luke made about the piping that I made earlier, is that the way that this is structured with Magic Attribute Protocol specifically, it's, I think what Bitcoin was really trying to get at when they said future-proof, right? You can put arbitrary data on chain now that fits a protocol that everybody uses and pipe it, and then put some arbitrary on data behind it that only you use, but that might become valuable in the future. And it didn't break anything that was using the previous protocol. Right. So I really see this as the foundational steps to realizing some of the technical dreams that Bitcoin had presented from its very early days.
Yeah. And Siggi, you've implemented many aspects of Bitcoin schema into Blockpost. So could you talk through how you view it?
Yeah, so we had Luke and I we had lots of discussions about I think over the last 2 years or so. When I started Blockpost as well, I wanted to change everything. I wanted to do it differently, and Luke had a hard time, calling me back and keeping me on plan, because the documentation wasn't there yet, so there was everything was still open. But I remember a lot of the things that we actually talked about had nothing to do with, is this protocol the perfect protocol or anything like that. It was more, we need something to standardize, right? It's better to have a standard than have lots of fantastic things that are not standardized. And I want to add another thing to that as well, is we had a lot of discussions if we're actually going the right way, because it's all plain text in an awk return. There's just extra signatures. It's not very efficient. You can probably do it in script a lot better. You could do it, Run could probably do it all better. And the reasons the protocol is as it is, and it is so simple as it is now, is it actually creates maximum interoperability, not just between applications using it, but everybody that wants to use it. So you can use any wallet to create these transactions. That was a big thing for us as well. So, try to create some special script with your Handcash wallet. So you have your website, you have Handcash login, all that stuff. It doesn't work. This works. But also regarding getting the data again. So you need some kind of indexer, something like this one. That's to index your data and to get everything. And that was seen as some people said that was a disadvantage. Put things in the UTXO set and all this kind of stuff. But actually, everything that we've seen over the years also needs an indexer. So you have Run needs an indexer, Stas has an indexer. The script stuff doesn't have an indexer, but nobody can find anything. How do you find your little token or thing on script? That's actually a big problem. And this stuff doesn't have that. So if you need an indexer anyway, and you want to be have the maximum interoperability with all these other tools, then this, I think, is the solution that you would come to. And of course, there might be better things, better ways of doing this or that. But on the whole, it's a fairly simple, robust system that works with everything. I think that's an important part.
Yeah, and there's live apps that show it works. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point about the indexing, because you need the protocol stuff and some of the fields in the way. That stuff has to be defined before you can even start to put it into a database with key value pairs and that sort of stuff. Okay, the next question I want to ask that newcomers viewing this might also ask, and a big criticism of just all our approaches here, is why put social interactions on a public blockchain?
Okay.
So Luke, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I get it. I get why people are like, this makes no sense. Like, I want to delete my tweets half the time anyway. Like, why do I want to have this permanent record here? And it's about this situation that we find ourselves in. We have a handful of people. It took Elon Musk mustering up $44 billion and buying Twitter to like divulge the secrecy and corruption that was happening with the curation of the data on that platform. Everyone's oblivious. No one gets to know what's going on. That's the reason. So, I mean, that's like reason number one, but there's other stuff. I mean, so they've got the blue check marks, right? And then Elon's changing this from being you're a special person who's buddy with a buddy of Twitter, so we're going to give you the blue check mark, versus you've proven that you are who you say you are, you get a check mark. That latter one makes a lot more sense for a lot of different reasons. I get why people are like all up in arms about it. But that's the same way that Bitcoin attestation protocol works. Getting a BAP ID is like getting a blue check mark, but it's a decentralized blue check mark that goes cross-platform, right? So again, you can do all these things the right way in a single platform, and you can have a benevolent leader that kind of does things the right way or whatever. And you see this with a lot of other systems. People don't like YouTube, so they start Rumble. They're not happy with Facebook and Twitter, so they start Truth Social and all these other things. It's the same problem. What happens when those people get corrupt? What happens when the same thing happens 5 years later with that platform? This breaks out of that. It removes the control. It's very similar to what Bitcoin does for money. We've heard Craig say, Bitcoin removes power from money, right? And that's the big thing that it does. That's the core thing that we're all here for. This does the same thing for data. It's really fascinating. So you could imagine to yourself all the different ways that we have giant data sets that are owned by companies. Somebody like an EHR Data, right? Giant company, billions and billions of records. They might not be manipulating anything, but the point is they could. They could go in there and change something around, and all of a sudden somebody's getting a heart transplant or something like that, right? Like there's real danger in having custodianship of these things. And I think we used to be more responsible just as a society. And now we're in this red versus blue. Everybody's on a different side, and the ends justify the means. So people will do immoral things like censorship because it's for the greater good. It's kind of the mentality. We need something that takes a big old hammer to that concept.
Yeah, the point about if it's on the implication of it being on chain is, let's say if the blue check mark threshold was, X percentage of interactions with X behind the money behind it. Ignoring the fact that you can do bots, right? I'm sure you can put more controls to make that more accurate. But if it's on a ledger, regardless of the format of the data, everyone can see that this person actually engaged and had that many followers, etc. Versus with Twitter, like you could just have someone DM one of their employees, say, hey, I'll throw you 50K, just give me a blue check mark.
Which
right?
they were doing, yeah.
Which they were doing. Or they could get, if the game was to hit that threshold, they could hit it, but then, I don't like what you say politically, so I'm just going to delete all your interactions. And then they could say, actually, you never hit that threshold in the first place. Whereas on a public ledger, you can't do that, right? So, Zach, what's your opinion?
Well, and I'm sort of like when it comes to these types of a conversation, I'll take the ad nauseum approach, right? So while I do believe that censorship resistance is important, there are clear and globally accepted reasons to censor some things, including content.
100%.
Right. So to me, it's less about the ability to resist that censorship, because there are just some grotesque things in the world that the people on this call don't want to be associated with, right? And shouldn't have to be, because we've chosen to use the same underlying technology. That's not an inference that I want made about me, and I'm sure that you guys feel the same way. But for me, the openness of this protocol means that if in some way the tools that I choose to use become corrupted in the way that Luke has just described, I can take the things that I've already done and leave. The value is mine. I can't do that with Twitter today. You can't just pop open Mastodon and be like, oh, bring in all my tweets, right? And I think Twetch is actually starting to do a really good job of this, and they're doing it sort of like through a back door with Twetch that and these other interactions that you may have going back and forth from Twetch to Twitter. But to me, that's the foundation of the openness, is I get to vote with my attention. And if I don't like what the service is doing, I can bring my attention elsewhere without sacrificing the investment that I made in time in that type of a program or that online activity. And so that's where I stand on that.
Yep, Siggi, why should we do it? Why should we put these things on chain?
Well, why not? I think I wanted to take a slightly different approach, because if you put anything on the internet, and we've seen this many times, you should assume it's going to go everywhere. So you put a tweet on Twitter and you delete it 3 seconds later, there's probably 15 screenshots of that thing floating around, and somebody else was post that. So
There's sites that automatically archive it, yeah.
Automatically archive, the Twetch stat stuff. So what are we actually talking about? I mean, is this really something that is a problem? But I do agree with Zach, though. There is content out there that we don't want to distribute. But this is the thing. Anybody's welcome to do that. So if somebody does something weird on Blockpost, I will definitely remove that. I won't put that on there. Any kind of illegal stuff. I'm for everything up to illegal. So you could probably, please don't, but you could probably get pretty far on Blockpost before I would remove it. But illegality, that's the line. But of course, it's also going to be on chain. So the next thing is, would somebody like Jungle Bus remove that from their index, which is also a possibility if it is illegal. But again, you could always go directly to the blockchain. But the thing is, if somebody put it out there, it's out there. Somebody has it, and they can share it again. So I think it's a moot point saying, should you put it on the blockchain? And again, the blockchain is the best distribution network ever. So why not? And it's cheap. So these whole arguments, I know we've all heard those before, I think, about spam, and you're spamming the blockchain, and you're putting nonsense, and why are you putting things in the upper turn? Why do you care? I'm paying my fees. The miners accept it. They want to store it. Somebody's going to create a business like Jungle Bus to serve it up. Why do you care what I'm putting out there? I'm sending $10 million, $1, or I'm doing a stupid social media post or setting a cat picture. Why does it matter? You're paying your fees.
Yeah, I think the argument there is they think it's gimmicky, right? Like right. They think this is just something to get attention, and like it's not actually providing any real value. But just to touch on those couple things real quick, you can still remove anything, but think of what we do for email. We subscribe to RBL lists. There's a company out there that's curating and like finding who are the spammers, and then you subscribe to that, and those get filtered out of your client automatically. That could easily happen with social posts and things like that. There can be, there's lots of ways to deal with this stuff. It just requires thinking about it differently. It's a new type of system.
And to Luke's point, I mean, if you don't like the way that your service is curating that content for you, you should be able to go to another service. Right. Like that's the openness.
Right. That's the whole point. You could log out of one and into the other. Your relationships are there. Your connections are there. All of the stuff is there. That's the one thing that nothing else can do. And not to mention the cross-platform DMs. That's like a whole nother level of that same concept, but just like really cool.
But you could also, and you could also have that within the same service. So you could have a service, and you say, I like Christian content. for as an example or whatever. So I'm going to subscribe to this Christian group that filters out the stuff that's against my beliefs, and therefore I get a certain type of feed. So there are all these things possible there. They don't have to be in this one platform. So you can get many people creating this ecosystem, and you can be in this big ecosystem, getting the content or things, creating your own bubble, just like we do now on Twitter. But you can create your own bubbles, but with much more choice.
Right.
But you choose your bubble in this way, right? Like in the
Right.
Twitter model, they're suggesting people to you, right, in hopes that like their algorithm gets you more content from the people that they're following. But in this model, you're choosing to interact and engage in a relationship with the people who are publishing this content.
So we got a question, guys, from KP Dad. So has anyone looked into or used the Link SV protocol? If so, what's your opinion compared to other ones? So personally, I have not, but have any of you guys looked into it?
I do remember looking at it at some point, but I can't right now remember the specific details.
I'm going to give Magic Attribute Protocol a plug here and just say I was a run guy moving towards S-Script. Connor at some point said to me in a conversation, I think that we were having live actually, that the best way to do this is discrete data. The best way to do almost anything right now is discrete data in outputs. And I didn't quite understand what he meant until I saw Magic Attribute Protocol and how elegantly it wrapped that statement in code and in an output. And I didn't look for anything else after that. Magic Attribute Protocol was nice.
All right, we got another question from Freenots. Does Twetch use open social protocol? So Luke, you want to address that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit of a hybrid there. I think in the early days of Magic Attribute Protocol, there was a guy with the handle named Brain, and he was working on some of the backend stuff for Twetch, and he did add Magic Attribute Protocol to posts and things like that. So this is why Bitchat Classic, if you turn on verbose mode, you could see Twetch posts. They were building Twetch when this stuff was still getting settled a lot. So they needed to move forward on some things and make their own decisions. So the point is there's some things that they do that are kind of their own way. It's a little bit like what we were talking about earlier. Hona does this similarly, where you have some data that complies so that something like a Bitchat can see it's there, can provide a link off to Twetch to see the full content. But it's also enriched with additional data that's very specific to Twetch. Right, that's not part of the Bitcoin schema thing, but Twetch can see that and render it and everything else. And I think, Twetch
but you can
in general,
still see that, right? If you pull the transaction back, you can still see it. So while it's not using Magic Attribute Protocol for those things or Open Social,
well,
like they are, it is following the same kind of standard, right?
Yeah, it's very close, but there's certain things that aren't using it, right? So like, but I mean that's fine, and I want to talk about the dynamic here a little bit. So I would expect that the largest social network would want to not participate in this kind of openness. Why? Because they put in the work to build this network effect, and being part of a shared network means you're sharing your network effect, basically. So this is something that I would imagine those guys would probably be a little hesitant to want to really fully embrace. But I think if open protocols become a larger network effect collectively between multiple clients, people will think of things a little bit differently. Be like, maybe it is beneficial for us to lean into this a little bit more because we'll get more participation and more content and things like this. So it needs
the data needs to be able to come back, right? Right now, if you were to think about it and call them by name, Twetch, right? They're the ones with the value sharing it outward to the openness of people who are trying to get the information from the protocol. But if there were other services using the same protocol that also had valuable information that Twetch could then take in from the outside, then they may be more open to that value exchange with the open market.
Yeah, currently the way it works is there are some...
Hold on, guys. We're about to hit a short break. But yeah, these are great points with it. And I think it does. This recent point highlights how services get to pick and choose what they want to show from the chain. It's not just this open thing. All right, but first we'll take a short break and then we'll be right back.
This is London, coming at you. Everybody, this is London.
transition from that world into blockchain.
It's a way to track and validate the originality of that particular piece of work.
Key technical personalities are quitting the BTC Core project.
How have you found developing on Bitcoin SV?
On one end, kind of what we're doing is very, at least right now, is very oriented towards the marketing, experiential, sort of stuff. Kind of like Pokemon Go for brands.
Who's doing more transactions in Ethereum? BSV, yeah, but how many? Wait, that's 2 companies?
One of the reasons why some of the professionals that were surveyed are not implementing blockchain yet is because of regulation.
For want of a better word, I'm sort of acting as a bit of like an ambassador, sort of introducing the blockchain technology into the iGaming vertical.
When you meet Craig and the other, how does that compare with the people that you knew in the pre-internet days?
Cryptocurrency movement is smarter and more sophisticated about computer science, more alert to the flaws in the international economy, and more shrewd about new entrepreneurial and business models than was the internet movement that preceded it.
How do you respond to all that? Do you feel shut out by it? Are you entertained by it? Or, is it just don't care?
I think it can be quite an intimidating space. I think that's sort of what the whole point of the Women of BSV was about, really, was to just kind of attack it from a different angle and be more inclusive.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So, Siggi, you wanted to make, before we're going to get into Bitchat, but you wanted to make a point about Twetch and how they use the open social stuff.
Yeah, so when I started this, to start to create Blockpost network, starting to look a lot about the protocols, and we started using Planaria at the time to index stuff. We're getting all these Twetch posts in. It's like, this is very exciting. So we can actually, the whole idea, kind of like a bootstrap a new network with all these posts. But very, very quickly, I found out that they're actually not using these things anymore. So they must have started out with using map and in a standard way, but they very, very quickly went to do something else. And today it's very weird, which is a bit of a shame, I think, to be honest. So the Twetch posts that actually show up on Blockpost network, it was painful to get them in there. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. And to be honest, I'm actually kind of using their API to get stuff because it's not on chain anymore. And I have a feeling that the further they go, the further we're away from this open protocol stuff. And it's just getting harder and harder. You can also see there's only Twetch and a couple of people actually on Blockpost that show up now from Twetch. I feel, I simply feel, they have the most users, they have the most engagement, they have the most posts. So they kind of are winning, right? They're right because they have the most stuff. But they're turning into all the stuff that we talked about earlier, like the Twitters. There'll be these closed systems. Everybody has their encryption key on. Can you really move to a different service? No, you can't. So they're just becoming the next Twitter, putting things on blockchain, but it's not open anymore. So it's kind of a missed opportunity, I think, because I think it's again about somebody wanting their biggest piece of the pie, but people keeping the pie small instead of making the pie a lot bigger, so there's more people that can enjoy the pie. And I just want to add that. Yeah.
So the first question I want to ask for the second part of this is about Bitchat. So first, before I get into it, I want to say that us four here are responsible for creating the 5 clients that are out there.
Hey guys.
I think we're pretty well equipped to discuss this stuff. So first, I just want to ask from each of you, what is Bitchat? So Luke, again, kick us off.
It's the same thing we've been talking about, open social, but for just chat style messages instead of like Twitter style posts.
Yeah, Zach, and Zach, you were the last one to make a client and do it. You did it very quickly. So how do you view it?
For me, it was a way to allow a community to both engage internally and externally from the same client. Not to say that like if you go to the social clubs network and post that it's somehow not viewable by Bitchat, it is. But it allowed us to segregate the feed from people who posted from our site and people who posted from anywhere. So you could curate your own conversation, so to speak, or your own experience. And that was like a light bulb moment for me, right? The data was already there. I didn't need my users to come and chat for them to have value in our chat window. And it spurred me to go pull some Twetch data and try to make a social, because the schema is pretty close to chat also, to message. So it was, like you said, I was able to do it very quickly by the end of the first day. It didn't even take a whole day. I found out about Bitchat in the morning. I did work. By 3:30 or 4, I had closed up my tickets for the day, and I was like, hey, let's check out this Bitchat thing. And by 7 p.m., because I had some wallet issues, not map or Bitchat issues, we were posting from site, on a live page. So it was a pleasure, and it's kind of why I didn't have to go ever look for anything else.
Right. And Siggi, you also integrated it into Blockpost.
Yeah, that was it was similar to what Zach says. It was done very quickly. And then I wanted to improve it, and I got into a rabbit hole, and I don't think I'm out of it yet. So I'm still in the first version of my implementation. But I think it's just an evolution of what we're doing, right? So putting social posts on, it's like I'm sending something, but now we're actually interacting with people a little bit more. So it's like this next step in the evolution of these kind of open protocols. And the next one, I think, I don't know if Luke has actually released it yet or not, but the DMs, so we can actually DM people on a social, and that's very exciting because you don't have to know where the people are, you don't have to connect, you don't have to know how they're posting things. You could be doing a cleave through VPN in China somewhere and nobody knows, and you'll be actually get your message. That's very exciting actually to take it to the next step as well. But these are just evolutions of these open protocols.
Yeah. So we got a question from Josie. I'm sure I'm going to say this last name wrong. Sahagun. I heard of Bitchat Classic and Bitchat Nitro. What other chat programs use open protocols to work? And can you explain this more, please? So I'll start with this one. So yeah, Luke has created 2, Bitchat Classic and Bitchat Nitro. Classic actually was first an Unwriter project, which kind of kicked off all this stuff back in early 2018. And Nitro is just an iteration of that, which has channels, which was also very easy to add. And you guys can talk about that more after I answer this. I built one on Retrofeed, my site, that implements these same protocols, which again, same feedback as Siggi and Zach. It was very easy to do it. Most of the work was actually done around the UI and all that, but the actual interaction with the chain was the easiest part. And I think that kind of harps on what we talked about in the first part, is that because these protocols are very similar, that's in the Bitcoin schema, if you just give us another type, it's so trivial to implement because we're not starting from zero, right? We can just, that's why the common theme is that we just did it in 2 hours, right? So so those are the other ones. And then I mentioned Siggy's done his own with blockpost.network, and Zach implemented it on Punicorn Club. So what is it? What's this?
Punicorn.club.
Yeah. Okay, so Luke, do you want to also field this question?
Yeah, I'll just say you can go to bsvdata.com and go to the protocols section on there, and you could see Magic Attribute Protocol, and you can see kind of all the different transactions that are using that. If you were to look through those a little bit more, what you'd find is there are transactions that Twetch is making that are tagged as posts and things. So there's a limited amount of that stuff, and then there's all the TonicPow transactions are tagged with map. They're not using some kind of interoperable open social thing, but it would be very easy. Like obviously the idea was to move in that direction. I've already got every action that's going on TonicPow tagged that way. And the real dream long term is the same kind of interoperable open protocol for a advertising marketplace. There's not, there's been ones that have used it in the past, but with the typical product cycle in BSV, a lot of these things tend to be sort of demos or small projects that get a bunch of users, and then people kind of forget about them. Like 3 years later, somebody will post and be like, "Oh wow, look at this amazing site." Be like, yeah, that's like 3 years old. But anyway, there's a whole bunch. I'm trying to think of some more off the top of my head. On bitcoinschema.org, there is a small list somewhere of a bunch of different projects that use it. I'm trying to think if there's any kind of bigger ones. There's not. It is one of the if you look at all the different protocols that are used in Bitcoin, it is one of the top used kind of protocols in general. But I think that just has to do a lot with the volume from a few players. But there is a long tail, and often on Bitchat Classic, there's an app leaderboard command. So you can go on Bitchat Classic, type /app leaderboard or /ALB, and you'll see all of the different Bitchat clients who have posted within the last 24 hours or something like that. So sometimes I just check that. There's like ones I've never heard of, or like things people are doing it from a little client application on their own computer. It's not even a website or something, right? But that's the level of control you have and kind of ability to get out of the intermediary problem. I'll mention one thing quick here about the DMs as well. We have Signal. We have lots of different Twetch chat, right? You have lots of different things. You still always have to trust the client that they're not like reading your data right there on the front end before it gets encrypted and sent off, right? And so if you don't have open source and you can't see all of that stuff, then you're not really sure, and you can't go to some other platform to DM this person on Signal because obviously they're not interoperable. Well, this concept means that in the future we could have multiple clients and use the one that you trust the most, and then you're good, and the other person uses what they trust, and you can communicate.
Yeah,
build your own.
Sorry, real quick. The point you just made about the security, right? Yes, you are correct that Signal, WhatsApp, all these apps that claim to be secure, we have no idea if they're actually reading it. We just have to trust the man at his word, right? Which we know how that goes typically. But like you said, if there's an open protocol, someone could just open up the terminal on their machine, and as long as they build a transaction in that manner, they don't have to worry about it because they have this software on their computer. That is actually the most secure way to do it. Obviously, not everyone's going to do it, but most people don't care, clearly, because people use Twitter DMs, they use WhatsApp, they use Signal. So they're willing to sacrifice some level of trust for the UI, right? And that's fine. That's that's subjective based off the individual. We have a question related to this from Brandon Ward. Even though we want accountability, how will private DMs remain private and secure? So Zach, you were going to make a point about that.
About how DMs remain private and secure? I don't think that was me.
I did interrupt you as well.
No, I don't think I'm the right person to speak on this. I don't remember what I was going to say, but what I will say about this in DMs being private and secure and the level of trade-off with trust in the bigger tech companies is, I think for a lot of people, specifically those of us who are in tech or maybe just we're born after a certain year and grew up with an iPhone in your pocket from kind of as long as you remember, you're probably not sharing the most important or potentially volatile messages through Signal or WhatsApp or Facebook. And quite frankly, I'm not going to tell you that text message is better or more secure, because that's not what I'm trying to say. But what I do mean is people make the distinct choice to go direct one-to-one in something that they know is potentially just between them and this other 10-digit number, and has been trusted, because text messages haven't really been leaked in the same way that Twitter messages have, Facebook messages have, WhatsApp chats have, group chats have. And so, I'm not convinced that whatever's going on through social or through these social communication channels is so bad that we need to stop it. I think people who are doing the really bad stuff find different ways to go about this. And if they're going to encrypt their message and push something through a terminal transaction, there's no way that anybody's going to figure that out. There's just absolutely no way. So let's stop worrying about it right now, right? Let's build products for the 98% of people who want to be rational actors, good participants in the ecosystem. And as we say this in the other business all day, right? I can't prevent people from committing fraud, but if you do it on a blockchain, that's a really poor choice as a criminal. Right, you can't get rid of the evidence.
Yep.
And maybe again, add something to that as well, is that I have the idea that it's a little bit naive. What we hear from some other people in crypto, I won't mention any names, but it's kind of naive that you think you can get away from the government. They have infinite resources and they have things that we have no idea about. So trying to hide something from the government is actually very, very, very difficult. And you can argue that some of the stuff that we do use something CLI. There is actually a CLI out there too that I created that you can actually post onto chain. You can do that now. But for me, that's not the point of most of this. The point of most of this is actually to make sure that this group of hackers in some faraway country isn't breaking into a database and getting all my personal information, because that database contains 40 million people or something like that. That's more of the point. So you talk about these Twitter things leaking. That is a central database that can be attacked. So if you're encrypting everything with your own encryption key, and your encryption key is only on your mobile phone or something, and doesn't actually sit in a central database, that's a lot harder to do. So distributing these things and actually giving power back to the people themselves, I think is a much more important thing. Trying to run away from the government, I think, is something that is, you probably shouldn't be using these things either if you want to do that, because that's really, really hard. But getting away from the centralized model, I think, is something that we can do.
I think for some of us, though, it's not necessarily just getting away from the government. It's ensuring protection from future crappy governments.
Right. Yeah, that's a big part of it. I did want to say one really interesting thing you might not imagine when you think about why would you want to, put encrypted DMs on chain between people and this sort of thing? Like, what's the point? Well, personally, I all the time need to send myself stuff. Yeah. So either email something to myself or I send it to myself in Slack or like whatever. And there's something really cool about this when I can message my own self and put something on the blockchain encrypted where I can access it later as well. So it also kind of has this built-in Dropbox type of effect. We haven't added attachments and media in Bitchat yet, but that's an arbitrary thing. The protocol supports it. That's very easy to add. It's one of the things on the to-do list when we'll get there. But then it'll be just like I could send myself that copy of my passport or something that I need to get on another device and actually not have to worry about anybody getting it or somebody hacking my email later, searching for the word passport in my email and like finding, you know what I'm saying? Like if you really think about how vulnerable you are by using these tools, if somebody does gain access to your stuff, I mean, whatever. It's kind of the same thing. Somebody gets your keys, there's an issue there as well. So there's trade-offs with all this stuff,
Yeah, I think there really isn't a spoon here. And, one thing I'm kind of looking forward to is the ability for other people to easily use this stuff. Like we definitely have, we have some clients, but what I want to see is more clients that have different themes, different skins, different functions that people choose, right? Like now I have to choose, if I use Twitter, I have to choose their messaging app, which is fine. But I'm sure people choose whether to use something like Signal or WhatsApp based off subjective preference, right? Oh, I like this user interface. I like this has dark mode, or I like this implementation of dark mode, that sort of stuff. So I think with Bitcoin, we can, start tokenizing some of this stuff and have kind of like micro economies built around these different features. We got a question from Carl Walker. Could different networks use some sort of mixer so their messages would be encrypted on the protocol? So anyone want to take that, Luke?
Well, so what's going on here is you want to communicate with a person, but you don't have a typical convenience of having an authentication system with a single platform where you could say, hey, give me this user's private communication key or like whatever. And so we need some way to be able to discover who wants to talk with you on the blockchain and share keys, like public keys, with each other so that you can encrypt messages and communicate with each other. There's no need, as far as the keeping things private, it's the encryption that does that. And there's mixers are generally associated with keeping the source of funds, like what actually funded some transaction, private, and mixing things up and confusing it. In this case, there's actually a huge caveat with the current implementation of DMs that I think everybody should know about, because this is step one. But obviously we know where we want to get. Step one is the way that we're doing it now. You have this coordination on chain. So you can see that two people are doing basically friend requests back and forth. Now you can see that there are encrypted messages going back and forth between them. But this is a little bit less than ideal, right? It's still fine. It's fine for many use cases, like messaging yourself or like whatever. But there is information that you're leaking there about who you communicated with and when. And in fact, there's been major breaches in the real world that's all that they gained access to, and that was a big deal. So it's not a perfect solution, but it does give us this cross-platform thing. So what could we do next? I think the idea is we do coordination on chain, and then we use something like IPv6 or whatever to directly communicate those messages back and forth to people afterwards. And I think Twetch was on it. They did DMs, they did it in a private way, and I think that made a lot of sense the way they implemented. What we're trying to do is go after some new properties that don't exist with the current paradigm.
Yeah. We got another question from Brandon Ward. How easy would it be for current social media powers if they were interested to migrate to this protocol?
Stupid easy.
And
it would be more likely that they would just start to pull a feed, right? Rather than migration, they would just update so that it commingled with their platform's data, and it would be sort of seamless for the user. They wouldn't even know the difference.
But if there's 1,000 clients and they're all showing stuff, right? And I'm not posting and I've got this big network and I want to join in on this. If I'm not posting my stuff to the chain as well, then I'm missing out, right? Because if I do post it to the chain in a way that those are all going to absorb, then all these websites are giving me backlinks. Like they're showing the source is this app and there's a link off to that. Like Bitchat has a link to Retrofeed, has a link to the Punicorn Social Club and to Blockpost. Imagine that multiplied by so many. And then I think it actually becomes a way of advertising almost. You post on this open social network, it shows up on all these different websites, and they know there's some information in that post that tells them a little bit about where the source of that data came from.
Yep, and I want to add to that one that if us 4 rogue devs solo effort can implement it very quickly, imagine people who are not having fun staying poor like us, like Twitter, people that actually have capital. Imagine how quickly they could implement it. All right, we have another question. From Free Knots. How do open social protocols directly benefit musicians, artists, and content creators? So this is a great one.
Yeah, this one's pretty well suited for me, I think. So for those who don't know, I built Jamify. That's jamify.xyz. It's a NFT marketplace for music NFTs. It uses order lock. Order lock is basically like an open social protocol, just without the social part, right? So this is another one of these use cases where you can have a standard way to put data on the blockchain, and then multiple people can interact with that from multiple platforms. I think it's the coolest thing ever. And the fact that artists and musicians, they have something to sell, they can tokenize those assets, put them on an open marketplace that's just on Bitcoin, and they show up on sites like Jamify and hopefully 1,000 others. This is direct access to distribution. This is what they don't have. This is why they have to go through so many middlemen to get a reduced portion of the revenue from their creative works, is because they need these other people to help distribute and get their music out there. If something like this became very big, they would have direct distribution. Almost like you have somewhat like direct distribution when you kind of are able to put something on Facebook Marketplace or like Craigslist or something like that to some degree. But this is way bigger and better because it could be combined marketplace, like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace could be combined, right? You search in one place and you're getting results across them, but then now imagine 1,000 other sites. So yeah, and that's just, we're only talking about music in that context, but again, extrapolate that. It could be everything. This is very similar to OpenBazaar, right? OpenBazaar was trying to create something like this, but what they didn't have was a cryptocurrency that could write things on chain. So they started using IPFS, which is like ephemeral, instead. But what they could have been doing is putting these products for sale directly on the blockchain in a standard format instead of in a sort of, the way that they ended up implemented. But, there's a lot of room for new products, new things, new ideas. It's a wide open space, and there's just, tons of room for new
It's also
innovation.
great for curation. Right now, if I want to go searching, I'm limited to the artists that have gone through the hoops to get into Apple Music or Spotify or whatever other service that's required for them to share revenue. But in this model, I can just go search literally all of the music on chain to find what I want, or better yet, somebody else who's even more into music than me can go find obscure things that I'll like, and I can subscribe to their curation service, creating 2 new profit models in the interim, right? Taking that power away from the centralized database and putting it back in the hands of the individuals who are creating those playlists for the powerhouses like Spotify.
Yeah, that's one of the things Gemify is adding is playlists, right? So you'll be able to create a playlist and then publish that publicly, and then other people can see what you've collected there or whatever. So like you're saying, it's kind of curation. And then if you add the open social elements, now I can follow these artists, and now I have a feed, and I'm seeing all the new music and things more from an organic kind of social network style across artists. So there's just so many really cool ways that we can do this, and you start to really feel the limitations of the old way. Right, the way where you have the monolith, you have to have exclusivity agreements, and like somebody's over here but they're not over there, and we've had monoliths that did a pretty good job of securing licensing, so people are happy with like Spotify because they have enormous collection of music. They basically almost have everything, but in order to get there, artists in the end, most of the long tail of the artists are getting a dismal percentage of the revenue that's changing hands because of all of this greasing that has to go on in order to amass that catalog from a licensing standpoint.
We talked about this from a music standpoint, but the same thing is true for television or video media, right?
Absolutely.
It's just a bigger dollar market, I think, but tougher for us to tackle right now because we're not putting a lot of video on chain.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I am really annoyed with the state of things lately, that if I want to watch a movie, even if I have Netflix open or whatever, I tend not even to search inside of Netflix or whatever. I'll go to Google, search for where I can stream it, because I'm afraid I'm going to spend the time with the clunky Netflix interface on my PS4 controller to like type something in only to find it's not there, and I have to go somewhere else. So I have 15 different streaming services, and I have to figure out who's got what when, and then I find a Google result, and that was actually last week they had that. They don't have it anymore. So I thought they did, and I searched for it, but now it's not there, and I don't know. You know what I mean?
This speaks to another thing, though, is that we have all these great protocols, and we have this fantastic blockchain, and we have this fantastic technology, but unfortunately my conclusion is people don't really care. They want to be part of something, and they want a beautiful interface, and they want the UI, everything, and they giving their data to Twitter isn't all that. Twitter works fantastic most of the time, especially now that Elon has gotten kicked in the butt there. It's starting to work better, but it's good enough. So we talk about all these open protocols. We have to be a lot better on that side as well to give fantastic user experience. And I don't think any of us, at least I'm not very good at user experience. So that's something that we really need to do. I think Twetch has done a good job of that lately. So I was like 3 years ago and started Blockpost Networks, 2 years ago. Like, I'm going to be a competitor to Twetch, and I thought I'm going to be faster and better, and it was faster and better. But today it's not. They've done a really good job of improving that, and I think that's very, very important. You can have all the open protocols you want, but we also need fantastic applications that just work really well for users to really scale.
The applications come second, though, right? Because of the top 20 open protocols, none of them are household names. You know what I mean? Right? Like almost nobody knows SSH, and it's really widely used. But you get down to things like Bonjour or SIP or RDP, and those are like really obscure, but they enable these types of user experience. So first, we need the protocol to be stable enough for people who can make that time investment in the UI to trust that it's worth their time to make that investment. And I think we're getting to that stage right now.
So we stay poor, and then somebody else becomes rich of the protocol work that we've done over the last couple of years.
Well, also none of those protocols charge, right? So it's incumbent on the people who are using them or developing them to figure out ways to profit from them early, especially if we know that they're going to be open in the way that Luke has described, using Magic Attribute Protocol for a marketing service that should be immensely profitable when put up against the marketing service of a Facebook or a Twitter.
Yeah, and related to this, I think this will be the last question we take, is from Ins News. How do you see mass adoption taking place? Do you think achieving social popularity is important for all these apps? For example, going viral on social media. So Siggi, that was related to your point about people want just a nice experience. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we need to give them a really nice experience, and then, I mean, we don't have a lot of barriers to entry anymore. I mean, it's really, really cheap to put things on chain. So we're not. So for instance, in Blockpost, we're just charging the transaction fee, and that's negligible. I have list pages and pages of stuff, transactions in my Handcast wallet, and it's all zero. No, I have to zero. My balance never changes. It's like I'm posting and liking and doing all these things. So that there's not a barrier to entry there. So I think it is in the applications, creating a network of applications, get more people to create applications that are really nice. And if they don't use my application still, I don't mind. That's also a good thing because it still benefits, because there's these interactions, and the users that I do have, they can interact with the users of the other application. So it's I'm saying that making the pie bigger.
I think you're really going to love what we're doing with Magic Attribute Protocol. Our designs are incredible. It's the first thing that we paid like an actual designer to do. And I'd love to show both of you offline, since I know we only have like 3 seconds left in this broadcast. For all 3 of you.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a great discussion, guys. Thanks for coming on. And I hope the viewers learn more about some of this open social stuff. And frankly, I'm kind of motivated to start going back to work on retrofeed. And for any unanswered questions, you guys can go to the CoinGeek Telegram group. There's a link on the bottom here, and we'll try to address those there if we weren't able to get to your question during the stream.
Cool.
Right? So thanks again, guys, for coming on. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Thank you.
This is London.